Hey guys, so at this point you should have already been through your ionic bonding lesson. So looking at those ionic bonds, today we're going to talk about how do we name ionic compounds. So you know how to do the crisscross method to figure out the formulas for the ionic compounds, but some of these compounds, or all of the compounds, have special names, and we have to figure out how to name them. And there's a couple of rules we're going to follow so that when you guys look at a compound, you can name it based on whether it's ionic or going forward covalent or polyatomic. So there are three types of naming. There's ionic compounds, which we're doing today, and then covalent and polyatomic compounds, which we'll do later in the week. Okay, so today we are only focusing on naming ionic compounds. So our ionic compounds are going to contain two types of elements, so your metals and your nonmetals. Remember, ionic compounds are bonds that take place between metals and nonmetals. So in an ionic compound, you will always have a metal and a nonmetal. Covalent compounds are two nonmetals, and then polyatomic compounds contain more than two types of elements. Again, we're only focusing on those ionic compounds today, which occur between metals and nonmetals. Okay, so remember, this is just a review. An ionic compound, you have a metal with a fixed charge and a nonmetal. Okay, so remember the overall charge of an ionic compound is always 0. We learned that in yesterday's lesson, but we're going to have our metal and our nonmetal bound together. Ionic compounds are those that contain a metal of a fixed charge. So group 1 elements are alkali metals, group 2 are alkaline earth metals, aluminum, zinc, silver, etc. Okay, and a nonmetal. So your transition metals can be in these compounds as well. So there are 3 steps to naming these compounds. Step 1, you're going to give the name of the metal, which is the cation. Remember, metals like to give away their electrons and become positive. Step 2, you're going to name the nonmetal, so the anion. All right, so that's the second part. And then step 3, you're going to replace the ending with the suffix IDE. Okay, so if you're talking about oxygen, so if you had a compound where oxygen was your nonmetal, you would drop the last part and oxygen would become an oxide. Okay, and we'll do a few practice problems in just a minute. So let's take a look at NaCl. We've already talked about this a little bit, but if we go through and we follow our steps, we should be able to find out what the name of this compound is. So step 1, we're going to give the name of the metal. So the metal is going to be the first element in your compound, which is sodium. Okay, so we know that the name of this compound will have sodium in it. Okay, done with step 1. Step 2, we're going to name the nonmetal. So sodium here is bound to chlorine. All right, so chlorine is our nonmetal. Okay, and again, you find your nonmetals and your metals from your periodic table. So you guys should have your reference tables. Step 3, we're going to replace the ending, so the ending of our chlorine, with the suffix IDE. So instead of saying sodium chlorine, we're going to say sodium chloride. Right? So to name this ionic compound, NaCl, would be sodium chloride. Okay, so just a couple more examples. We did sodium chloride, but next we have Ca and S. So step 1, we give the name of the metal, which is going to donate its electron, and that's calcium. Okay. Then we're going to find the nonmetal, which it is attached to, which is going to take on the electrons, and that's sulfur. But we go to step 3, and we replace the ending with IDE. So instead of being calcium sulfur, it becomes calcium sulfide. Okay? And again, if we're looking at these charges here, remember our ionic compounds, the overall net charge is neutral. And here we have AlI3. So Al is aluminum. I know it looks a little bit funny because the L and the I look the same. But the Al is the aluminum. So that's step 1. Give the name of the metal, the cation. Okay, step 2, naming the nonmetal. It's I, so it's iodine. Okay, but we have to drop the last part of that iodine and change it to an ide. So instead of being aluminum iodine, it's aluminum iodide. Okay, these are the 3 steps that you're going to follow each time you name an ionic compound. Okay, these are binary ionic compounds, so they contain 2 elements, bi meaning 2. We're going to deal with polyatomics later, but for now I just need you to know how to name an ionic compound. Okay, so let's do some guided practice problems. I'm going to just type these in so it'll be a little bit easier. So let's look at the first one. So we have Mg and O. If you look at your periodic table, you need to find those 2 elements, right? We know that one's going to be a metal and one's going to be a nonmetal. Okay, so Mg is what? It's magnesium. Okay, so step 1 was finding the metal, magnesium. Step 2, name of the nonmetal, is oxygen. Okay, so we have magnesium and we have oxygen. And then step 3, we're going to replace the ending with IDE. So instead of being magnesium oxygen, it's going to be magnesium oxide. Okay. So there is our first example. Okay, so then we have KBr. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can figure out what the name of this polyatomic or this ionic compound is. Okay, so K, step 1, the name of the metal, K is potassium, all right? And then the nonmetal is bromine, okay? But we're going to drop that ending of bromine and we're going to replace it with IDE, right? So instead of being potassium bromine, it's going to be potassium bromide. Okay. So now let's take a look at our next example. Go ahead, pause the video, and see if you can figure it out. All right, so step 1 is we got to find the name of our metal, which is going to be lithium. Okay, and then our nonmetal is nitrogen, but again, we're dropping the ending. So it's not going to be lithium nitrogen. It'll be lithium nitride. We got to add that IDE on there. Okay. 2 more. I think you guys have probably gotten the gist by now, but go ahead and pause and see if you can figure it out on your own first. Okay, so step 1, our metal, Be, that's beryllium. Okay, and then Se is selenium, but we're going to drop the last part of selenium and it's going to be selenide or selenide. Okay, again, we're just following these 3 steps. If you can follow these 3 steps for the binary ionic compounds, you will be A-okay every time. All right, last one. We've got Ki, so that is iodine. All right, so go ahead and pause and see if you can answer or give the name of that ionic compound. Okay, so K is our metal, which is potassium, right? So we're going to have potassium. And then I is iodine, which is step 2, right? Naming our nonmetal, but we have to drop the ending. So instead of being potassium iodine, it's going to be potassium iodide. Okay? And then those are your guided practice problems for naming your ionic compounds. Okay? This last slide here, these are just some of your cations and your anions, and then some common simple names for them. So hydrogen becomes hydride, lithium is lithide, so on and so forth. Okay, or lithium is the metal. Fluorine is a fluoride, chlorine is chloride, bromine, bromide, etc. So you guys have this presentation in your assignment for the day. So what I need you guys to do is go back to the assignment and check out your independent practice problems for the day. It's under your quizzes, but it also should be linked in your assignment for Wednesday, April 1st. These problems will be due on April 2nd by 11:59 p.m. If you guys have any questions, reach out to me, let me know. And we will be scheduling a Zoom meeting, I think, for the end of this week. So keep an eye out for announcements for a Zoom link so that we can meet up this Friday and kind of check in and see how you guys are doing. And yeah, so good luck. If you have any questions, reach out, let me know. If not, keep on keeping on.